needs you were looking to fill, or was it a case of you weren't really sure what your needs were because you really haven't had that much time to deal with the current team?
Well, I think the three biggest needs that I looked at, just looking at the roster, the most glaring ones is offensive tackle. We only have 2 scholarship offensive tackles in the program. That's not really the position that you want to be in. So that was a priority for us, getting some offensive linemen with length that could play offensive tackle for us. After that, the way we looked at it was safety was another issue. We have a little bit more depth at that position, but we're really top heavy in terms of, I think we're graduating 3 seniors at the safety position. So again, that was a little bit of an issue for us. I think there's only 2 underclassmen left after those guys, so we had to help ourselves there. After that, to me, you look at our roster. We got a quarterback that we feel really good about, and it would be a shame if we didn't find some talent to surround him with. Not saying that we don't have that in the program already, but building more depth and more playmakers at the tight end position and wide receiver, and I think we helped ourselves there. You look at the tight end position with Jasicki. I don't know if I've ever heard of a kid that was invited to the Army All-American game and invited to the McDonald's All-American game in basketball. That's pretty impressive. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before. And then the wide receivers that we were able to attract. I think our coaches did a great job recruiting those guys, but again, it helps when you got a guy like Hackenberg to get him the ball. He's going to attract those guys as well.
Coach, you talked about guys you recruited, right over here for a second. You talked about guys you recruited late in the process. Torrance Brown was one of them. You offered him, I believe, Monday. What did you guys like about him? And obviously he was a guy you were looking at, I believe, at Vanderbilt. What does he bring to this class? And I know he's a versatile guy, played a lot of positions in high school. Where do you guys see him fitting into this program?
We're going to play Torrance at defensive end. We've been recruiting him for a long time. He came to camp at our previous institution. You're talking about a guy who's 6'4", 235 pounds that was playing tailback in high school. Played tailback and linebacker as well as defensive end and rushed off the edge. We think he's got a chance to be a 265-pounder. Recruited him from day one as a defensive end. He was a guy that we were going to bring in the last weekend. At that time, we hadn't offered him. He had already committed to another school. Didn't want to come without the offer. Had a basketball tournament that he was getting a lot of pressure to play in. Probably a good thing. It worked out best for everybody because they won the tournament. They were champion of the tournament. He was the MVP of the basketball tournament, and he still ended up at Penn State. So what we're going to do is a couple of these guys, Saeed Blacknell, Torrance, as well as Christian, those 3 guys, we're going to bring them in official visits later on in the year. We can do that. We can bring those guys in later on, so they'll come in on their official visit later on this semester and get to celebrate with their family the commitment to Penn State.
James, I have like a 2-part sort of question here. First, I think earlier maybe on ESPN this morning you had mentioned like most of your staff hasn't even moved their family here yet. So like I was just wondering like how hectic, could you describe a couple of examples of how hectic it's been these last 3 weeks with recruiting and being on the road? And then also just secondly, I was wondering, like you mentioned just having like these connections with the guys in the last month, all these recruits you brought in. Were any of these guys you just fresh started recruiting them now for Penn State, or had you at least spoken to them before, like at least a few months ago with Vanderbilt or whatever?
Yeah, we were not going to get into a situation where we come to Penn State, find a guy that we don't know a whole lot about, and start recruiting them. That's a recipe for disaster. We weren't going to do that. We wanted to make sure that we knew these kids, we knew their families. We've been recruiting them for a long time. That's why you see, probably uncharacteristic of a Penn State recruiting class, these guys come from all over the country. Probably more so than any maybe recruiting class we've ever had here. So that's because of relationships that we had previously. I think you guys, from a scheduling perspective, I think you guys saw it. I thought it was a great deal when we got Koa Farmer to commit until I had to fly out there midweek and visit the kid and then take a red eye back. I think we landed at Dulles. I went and did a home visit with Nick Scott in Northern Virginia. Then I flew to Scranton that afternoon and did a home visit with Mr. Bay in Scranton. And then I flew to Pittsburgh. Then I flew to Pittsburgh that evening and did a home visit with an unnamed recruit at that time. and then flew that night to Atlanta to have breakfast the next morning with the recruits. So that's kind of how the schedule was. Andy Franks, who you guys will get to visit with here in a little bit, is kind of the mastermind behind the scenes at putting this whole thing together for us. He's a Princeton grad, a really, really sharp guy. I texted him one night, especially on the red-eye flight where I was a middle seat between two 300-pounders, wasn't real happy about that. I texted him and said, "You won't break me. I know you're trying to break me. You won't break me." You know, and you know, we had some fun with it, but that's kind of how the whole process went. We were flying around, doing whatever we had to do to put this class together, and as you guys have heard me say before, you know, really work hard to put a product on the field and off the field in this community that everybody can be really proud of.
James, you and your assistants have used the word length a lot to describe this class, particularly in the secondary. How much of a priority do you place on height or length when you're recruiting defensive backs particularly?
Well, I think if you look how the game has changed, you look at the wide receivers that we recruited in this class, with Godwin, who's 6'2", and Saeed, who's 6'3", Jasicki, who basically is a high school wideout, who's 6'5", 242 pounds right now. You know, we've all been places where you got a really good defensive back, but he's 5'8", and he's in great position and does everything right, and still can't make the play. So the length is important. If you're going to recruit a guy that's a little bit undersized, he better have tremendous leaping ability and great ball skills. Ball skills really make guys bigger, you know, because they can play the ball. So that's important. That's very, very important for us. The other thing where length is important is in growth potential. I'm a big features guy. I like to recruit guys with massive heads, big hands, long arms, and big feet, because that shows growth potential. So we talk about that all the time, features, recruiting guys with big features. And those guys have a chance to grow into big physical guys on the field and still have the athleticism that we're looking for. You'll see our model, that offensive line. Typically, we'll recruit the 6'5", 6'6" guys that are 275, 80 pounds that are high school basketball players, because we want speed and athleticism at every position. That's kicker, that's punter, that's long snapper, that's O-line. And a lot of times when you talk about speed, everybody thinks about cornerback, receiver, and running back. We're talking about speed throughout the program.
You mentioned Hackenberg. Michael O'Connor was already committed when you came to Penn State, and then you got Trace McSorley afterward. Can you talk about the importance of bringing in a couple other scholarship quarterbacks, specifically keeping O'Connor committed and then going out to get McSorley?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Although we all feel great about Hackenberg, he's the only scholarship quarterback in the program at the time when we got the job. So being able to get Michael on board, and I don't know if you guys remember, I mean, he was basically sitting in the meeting room waiting for me when I got there, and him and his family interviewing me to decide whether he's going to go to class the next day. Luckily for us, I don't know if you guys know this, but when he first came from Canada, he was in Tennessee at the Baylor School and had come to our camp at our previous institution and worked out for us. We were recruiting him, already had a relationship with the family, so I think that really helped. Same thing with Hackenberg, we had a relationship with him, so I think that helped. And then Trace McSorley, you know, you look at his background, you know, him and the quarterback who just won a Super Bowl, they're only two quarterbacks ever to take their team to 4 state championship games. You know, Trace lost his senior year in a state championship game, but one won at 9th, one won at 10th, one won at 11th, and took his team to the state championship his senior year. So he's a winner in every sense of the word. You look at his statistics and production. So being able to get 2 quarterbacks in this class is going to be very important. Now we got 3 scholarship quarterbacks for the future, and we're going to have to build on that in the next class.
James, aside from the physical attributes that you talked about, can you talk about some of the other qualities you look for in recruits? I know when you talked about your assistant coaches, you really emphasize guys with Ivy League backgrounds, you know, great college backgrounds. What are some of the things that you look for when you're recruiting kids like that?
Yep. I think the first thing is we want winners. And when I say winners, I mean that in every aspect of the word. And I'm talking about in the classroom, guys that are handling their business academically, are challenging themselves with the type of coursework they're taking. I think a big thing that you look for is absences and tardies on the transcripts. You know, I think that's a very, very strong indicator of work ethic. We want guys that are going to go to class consistently and handle their business academically. And we want guys that we can talk about and ask people in the community. It's amazing, you walk into the office and you're sitting there waiting to get into school, and there's a student there and you can ask them about one of the recruits. And you're gonna find out a lot, you know, when you talk to the guidance counselor, you talk to the teachers, when you talk to the other students, when you talk to the custodian staff. You know, my mom was a custodian at Chamonix High School where I went to school. You know, those people are the eyes and the ears of the schools, asking opponent coaches in the area what they think about them. We want to find out as much information as we possibly can. You go do the home visit. You see how they interact with their mom and their dad, or one of their parents at home, or their little brother or sister. It's all those things, and what we're trying to do is take all that information and try to figure out who this kid is long term. And I think we got a pretty good process of doing that.
James, with the increased exposure these kids get on ESPN or whatnot, how do you guys as coaches, when they finally do arrive on campus, kind of reset their mind to, hey, now we have a job to do? Because the recruiting process, you can see these kids are getting a lot of exposure and whatnot, but then when they finally get here, they actually have to, play football. So at the end of the day, what do you guys do as coaches to kind of reset their mind?
We de-recruit them. Yeah, when they show up, it's not walking around and going all over the country and everybody telling you how wonderful you are anymore. Nobody cares about the star rankings, whether you're a 2-star or 5-star, it doesn't matter. You went from being the man in high school to the bottom of the barrel. Now, how are you going to react to that? Are you going to fight back? Usually it happens when you got a freshman offensive lineman who's 18 years old and 270 pounds, and he's going up against a